Okay, so I was absolutely running wild because I could not extend my display screen of what was happening. So, also, let me get some, yeah, here, some music right here, and then we'll turn on. Okay, and I think this is the exact uh, thing I need on because it shouldn't be too bad. All right, and then there was a story I needed to reread. All right, welcome in, welcome in. I have to read this wonderful story here. It is by an actual visit 7300. I read it. Hold on. Fix my chair. All right. I read this story by actual visit 773. Oh my goodness. Shut up. So last time I read this story, it didn't go well. I had my audio looping on top of each other. It opened three different tabs, and the audio was so loud that you couldn't hear anything. And it was just absolute chaos. So I want to say that it is a good story to read, but it's also something that I was kind of, you know, crazy about. Cool. Cool, 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 cool. Make sure everything's going swimmingly. Okay. Uh, I will message him to see. Okay. If you are reading this, let me put here. Now, reading the. Oh, can't write live on YouTube. Join me. All right. 1 minute ago, so hopefully he pops on here and gets after it. My mouse is messed up, so if you see my page just absolutely dive straight down or up, the wheel for rolling it is messed up, so that's what happened. All right, so this one says insert his creepypasta name or her, there, whatever. Insert my creepypasta name, I don't know, part one. I would say that from reading this before, I would give the Curious Encounter at Rainbow Camp. That's what I would give it, um, just from what happened here. But spoilers. Let's dive in. Hey, this is the first part of my currently unfinished creepypasta. Enjoy. Hi, I'm Carnelian. I worked for the local news chain near where I used to live. Most of the stories I covered were unimportant, things like care home parties and other similar reports. But this story, this was different. Here's what I mean. The day started off normal. I had just woken up when I got a notification on my phone from my news company, which I will not reveal for privacy. It said the normal, until my eyes caught something at the end. This case could be your whole career surmised when you grow to tell stories of it. Now I was intrigued. I scanned the rest of the letter and my eyes found the words new summer camp and many parents shocked at children already complaining after a mere week. I immediately responded to say I was on the case and was soon sent the GPS coordinates for the location of the mysterious camp. When I got there, it seemed normal. The sign stated Rainbow Leaf Camp in bold, colorful letters. I took a picture on my camera for the report and continued in. I was greeted cheerfully by one of the counselors, who smiled at me. She said something along the lines of, Hello, Carnelian. I'm assuming you're the news reporter? I nodded and took a picture with her just in case it became important. Her hair was tied in a messy bun. She looked fairly young, around 20 to 25, and had intensely on theme rainbow core makeup. After I thanked her politely, I asked to interview a camp worker. She enthusiastically nodded and led me to the lead counselor's office, situated at the center of the camp. I entered the room and sat down opposite the lead counselor. She was also a woman, with auburn hair, large hoop earrings, and a slightly intimidating atmosphere. Uh, hello, miss. I said cautiously. She smiled, breaking the atmosphere. Miss Autumn, continue. I continued with the interview, and eventually was on the last question I had arranged. So, do you have any idea why kids have already been complaining? The summer camp has only been open a week, and her smile faded. If you want to find that out, I suggest you ask one of the ones who complained. I don't know a thing. She finished this rather haughtily, but I pushed further. But, Miss Autumn, it's only been a week. Get out of my office, Miss Autumn said quietly. I sensed the threat in her voice and quickly left. As I slipped out of the door, a slip of paper fell on the floor. I picked it up. I picked it up for her. She snatched it from my hand, and I only caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a child's drawing. It showed a happy child by the forest. In the forest, in the drawing, there appeared to be eyes. I realized this could be something good for my story, so I apologized and left. When I left, I decided to find a camper who hadn't complained, just to see his or her perspective. I asked the cheery camp worker, and she led me to a boy around the age of 7. Hi, he said quietly. Hi, what's your name? I asked this calmly so I didn't accidentally intimidate him, and he seemed rather scared of me. Toby? I nodded and began to ask questions. I soon filled my notes. I was nearly finished, but first, Toby, do you know why people have complained? Toby shook his head and I nodded. Maybe it was time to interview one of the complainers. When I found one of them, it was quite obvious she was in an entirely different attitude than Toby. It was a girl around 14 years of age. She had jet black hair with a streak of neon green, a black beanie hat, and the most goth scene outfit I have ever encountered. Hey, I said brightly. Hey, you here to interview me? She replied. I nodded and she sighed. Name's Vel. What questions you got? I nodded. She seemed much easier to interview than Toby was. Why did you complain about Rainbow Leaf Camp? I said, jumping straight to the point. Vel looked as if she knew this question was coming. Yeah, this place is weird. Like, not weird as in, oh no, I've been left at summer camp and the food is gross. That's what babies would say. It's weird as in, she cut herself off and glanced towards the nearest camp worker. Well, I said, now this was getting interesting. She continued, her voice now a whisper. Well, we aren't allowed near the cabin over there. You see, cabin 17? Well, most of the people who complained went there. I haven't gone yet. Her last statement seemed like an obvious lie. She had forced out the words to say she hadn't gone to cabin 17 yet, so that was suspicious to me. I took a picture of cabin 17 and continued. Are you sure, though? You know, if you want to get out of here, you can, if anything is seriously wrong. Vel seemed to be considering this, but shook her head as she saw a camp worker approach. Can't, sorry, Vel blurted out and practically pelted full speed in the other direction. I was left there, feeling bewildered and excited. It was entirely anything massive, but I had gotten a lot more from my case. I began to approach cabin 17. But before I even got close, I caught a glimpse of Miss Autumn and decided not to push my luck. So this is where I was getting to in the last part when I was giving my synopsis of the story. Um, the abrupt ending kind of got me all, hmm, you know, like if it was a little more like if Miss Autumn asked to, or like coerced him to go check out Camp 17. Oh yeah, no, nothing's wrong here. Just go in. And then as soon as she walks in, Miss Autumn slams the door shut behind them. That would be a good little ending to the part one. Um, I understand that I think actual visit 7300 is trying to build suspense there towards the end. I do like it. Has a very good theme on it, and I really think that the other parts that follow will be very good and very well read. But I can't wait to read some more. So, actual visit 7300. Good job. Keep writing. Um, yeah, that's it. I am going to now read mine. I got my I have a regular one and a prequel one. Now I've read the regular one before, and I want to say that I'm working on the third part. The third part will be listing every everything that happens. So we've already read this one. My great grandfather made a deal with the devil to be filthy rich. It didn't end well. So it was going pretty good. Here is my secondary one, the one that I wrote that was very good. I loved it. So I'm gonna give it a second real quick. Clean the palate, take a drink of this mysterious branded drink. Excuse me. All right, get in here. All right, so this is a content warning also for everyone. If you have not read the first one, or if you have not seen my video about the first one, I don't think you should continue because if you do, then you'll be spoiled in what happens the first time. So, but if you don't care about spoils, it is what it is. Here we go. Prequel. My great grandfather made a deal with the devil to be filthy rich. It didn't end well. A blisteringly hot day in 1942. Arizona has been known to have the harshest summers of any state, and this year would be no different. Angelo Salazar was a prominent businessman. For over 11 years, he owned a legal office. Being from the time, it was safe to say, he had no standing with the other lawyers, considering his race and ethnicity. Angelo arrived at his bungalow, which was a dual purpose building, one half for living and the other half for clients. Now, as you can guess, clients weren't lining up to receive his help, which is why he was startled when a strange man wearing a black duster and turquoise undershirt was waiting by the door as he arrived. Angelo. Hello? What can I help you with? Stranger. My name is Robert Stone, and it is I who has come to help you. Angelo eyed the stranger up and down, taking in every bit of his features and his mannerisms. Robert flashed a smile wide enough for Angelo to feel a chill run down his spine. Angelo. I'm sorry. I don't work with gringos. Robert's grin widened and he spoke. I'm not your typical gringo, senor. I am against these repugnant rules that state you have to be segregated to this dust bowl in the middle of nowhere. He handed Angelo a business card that was embossed with bold black letters. Robert Stone of Stone Law, handling all cases. Angelo rubbed his fingers over the print. It looks better than his. Much better. This man who appeared out of nowhere suddenly had an answer for his problem. No customers. Angelo. What are you? A brujo? Robert laughed a bit, too excitedly, and looked into Angelo's eyes. More like a demonio. Robert's smile faded. He was serious about this. Take as much time as you need. Just have an answer within the neck. Robert was cut off by Angelo. What will I get? Robert's grin split his face open, touching his ears and almost curling unnaturally at them. What you want? What is it you want, Angelo? Angelo thought for a brief second, then smiled like he was about to get over on a devil. I want to be rich, filthy rich. Robert dug into his duster. And in return, what do I get? His voice becoming more sinister as he spoke. Angelo smiled. He was 31 years old. He had no wife, no child, no responsibilities. You could have every male seed of mine for the next 100 years. Saliva dripped from Robert's twisted lips onto the floor. Sign here. Angelo grabbed a pen from his desk and went to sign the document. When his hand touched it, he felt like 1,000 little needles pricked him all at the same time. Blood flowed from his hand onto the page. The splatter wriggled themselves into a beautifully grotesque signature. Well, friend, that concludes our business. Angelo grunted at the searing pain in his hand. Demonio! When do I get rich? Robert replied, Seems you got a customer coming to you right now. When the door closed, it immediately opened back up. A farmer who Angelo had known for years had been attacked by some local cops for being in the way in town. Angelo documented the case, got the officers' names with basically no resistance, and helped his friend win the case in the amount of $200. Angelo was in disbelief. He had won against the system and won. His friend gave him $50. This was the start of his downfall. Angelo kept winning cases and getting loads of cash, hitting up illegal gambling sites and winning those as well. His worries over finances disappeared. So too did his memory of the encounter with Robert Stone. 3 years later, he got a building in town with his name on the front. However, knowing the backlash it would cause with his name being Angelo, he legally changed it to Richard. Now, Richard, formerly Angelo, was doing fantastic, pulling all kinds of clientele. One balmy August day, a beautiful woman walks in and has a claim filed for her job treating her poorly, and she figured with Richard's win rate, she could get over on them. Richard was enamored with the beauty that sat before him. He was at a loss for words. He worked diligently on her case and eventually won her $35. They chatted, and eventually Richard asked her out on a date. 4 months later, Esmeralda Flores told Richard she was pregnant. His heart wasn't happy. It was dreading, because the moment he heard those words, the contract unfurled in his mind. Richard begged her to get rid of the baby, that he wasn't ready to have a child yet. The argument became so fierce Esmeralda left, never talking to Richard again. The hits started coming almost immediately. His new building he sunk almost all of his money into started having foundational issues. Then came the bigots throwing bricks through his windows and protesting him, saying he changed his name to fit in. Then he moved back to where his bungalow used to be, only to see it had been torched with discriminatory signs stuck in the dirt around it. The final straw was his truck dying on the roadside with nothing but a blanket in the truck. He was destitute and broken. The truck was found a few days later, all shot up and the tires were sliced. Richard lay in the ditch next to the road, dead, with multiple gunshot wounds, dirt kicked all over his body, and a single white car that said, Filthy Rich. Loved it. Loved every second of it. And then I have kind of spoil it for you guys here real quick because nobody's gonna see it. You guys can't see this, only I can. This is a addition to this, so if you're listening in, just be sure to listen. You can't read it right now. Esmeralda. Esmeralda screamed in pain as she gave birth in the most rundown part of the hospital's maternity ward. One final push into the grueling 6 hours of labor. A beautiful baby boy. Oh my goodness, he's so precious. I'll call him Patrick. The nurse gave her a weak smile and handed the child to her. Where's the father? She asked inquisitively, but with a hint of disdain. Dead in a ditch for all I care. The nurse chuckled and took her leave. When she left, a tall, dark figure entered the room. He was wearing a black duster that seemed to go on forever. Under the brim of his hat, Esmeralda swore she saw a flicker of red in his eyes. She tightened her grip on her child as the man took his hat off to reveal his face. Mr. Stone. Good evening, ma'am. Someone told me that you knew Richard, uh, formerly Angelo. His voice, sweet and tender as to not disturb or instill fear into her. Esmeralda nodded her head. I have some unfortunate news. Richard has unfortunately passed, but I can see that you're busy. You can wait till you're out of the hospital. Here's my card. A white card with a black embossed lettering. Stone Law, handling all cases. Esmeralda took the card, and her body froze. Whatever he promised you, I can't give because he left me nothing. Mr. Stone looked amused at her, the fire in her. Well, actually, you see, it's not only you that he promised me something from. Your sister Diana also has something he promised me. He picked his hat up to leave. How is little Devon doing? Devon was her older sister's 2-month-old baby. She had said the father skipped town and she was now raising him alone. Fear gripped her. She looked down at her baby, Patrick, and started crying. Esmeralda, take me instead, please. Mr. Stone, are you of Mr. Salazar's seed? I'll tell you what I'll do. Since I am so generous, how about I'll allow 25 years for the memories? He smirked. You get your time, and I get mine. And seeing how you have some foresight into what will happen, I'll have to lock you down with an NDA. Speak a word of this to your sister, or tell your children. They are brothers, then I'll come for their souls earlier than expected. Esmeralda was stuck there with nothing she could do. That pig sold her beloved for a few years of money, and now he's dead. Finally, she spoke. How many did he offer? Not so many. How long? His voice hissed a bit. 100 years. He was so confident that he would never have kids. He did try his best, though. All I had to do was hire a belligerent manager to harass you, to steer you directly into his path. Her breath got caught in her throat again. He continued. His winning streak was because I put payment in all the right places. Silly humans will do anything for money. Mr. Stone placed the hat on his head and left the room. Esmeralda was left crying with the cruel reality her deceased fling had created for her. And that is what I'm working on right now. So, if you don't know, now you know. Let's get into some more Creepypastas. The piano in the basement. This looks pretty good. I was doing some watching of. I don't know if you guys seen Creepcast or not with Papa Meat and Wendigoon. Excuse me, but they did a retelling of one of the stories that I loved watching whenever I was younger. Mister Creepypasta did it, and it was called the Harbinger Experiment, and it did not age well. The writing on it was pretty bad, but it had some areas where it felt like, okay, yeah, I get that. That's pretty good. So I did enjoy it very much. It did bring back some little scary moments for me. So, all right. The Piano in the Basement by Parasitic Inflection. I'll do this story and then we'll probably, it's been about 45 minutes? 25 minutes. Cool. The house was large and cheap. That's why I bought it. I wasn't thinking. Even all these years later, I still kick myself over the impatience, over my unwillingness to just wait and buy a house of higher quality. Ultimately, I still blame myself for what happened in that home. I could have chosen to leave. I could have done a lot of things differently, but I didn't. What I experienced in that house will likely stay with me until the day I die. I graduated high school in June of 2006. Like many kids in my grade, I hadn't yet put together a concrete plan for my future. Unlike a fair few of the other kids in my grade, I hadn't needed to worry about my future. You see, just a few months before I graduated, my parents died. In the months leading up to my graduation, I came to terms with it, accepted they were gone. Okay, real quick, just want to say, I feel like this is AI generated because nobody really uses this right here. This right there, that feels AI generated to me because that's the only time I ever see these. All right. Uh, I came to terms with it, accepted they were gone. While I, in my teenage years, might not have had much to show in the way of financial success, they'd flourished. My mother was our town's dentist, and my father was a therapist with a PhD in psychology. To say the least, they were good at what they did. Now, that isn't to say that I didn't make any money. I had a few odd jobs here and there, but nothing stuck. I wasn't a bad kid, in fact. I'd say that of all my friends, I was the best behaved. Maybe that's why they did it. When I told them that I wanted to major in English studies, they couldn't have been prouder. My grandfather was right. My grandfather was a writer, and a pretty good one at that. He was a good man, too. I respected him a great deal and looked up to him. Even these days, when people ask, I always say that he was my inspiration for going into the English field. Perhaps my parents knew that the field I wanted to major in wouldn't yield significant financial success. Maybe that's why they did it. What? Why they took their lives? Okay. So there's two reasons why they did it. They have the first one up here. I was the best behaved. Maybe that's why they did it. So hold on, real quick. Um, while I was in my teenage years, do what they did. They said they making money. Say in fact, all my friends, I was the best behaved. Maybe that's why they did it. Why they did what? Why they took themselves out? Because you were a behaved kid? I don't know. All right. Uh, so maybe they knew. Maybe that's why they did it. Perhaps it was simply because they loved me and I was an only child. Perhaps it's because I was and still am their son. Okay. Maybe that's why I was the sole heir to everything. Okay. I'm gonna stop judging right now. I'm gonna stop judging. Just stop it. I'm gonna keep reading. But the writing seems AI, not like there's no thought put into it, I don't think. Okay. That's the last time I'm gonna judge it till it's over. Maybe that's why I was the sole heir to everything, their house, their belongings, their savings, all of it to me. I was over 18 when they passed, so there wasn't a need to wait for a certain age threshold to be passed. I'd crossed over any potential line. The inheritance was mine. I can't remember exactly how much money I got from them, but it was a sizable chunk of a recent high school graduate. For a recent, it was enough to keep me living comfortably for a few years. It wasn't until 4 years after I graduated that I decided to sell their house. Between payments for it and payments for room and board at the university I attended, it was beginning to put a strain on my mental health. Financially, however, I remained stable. The constant payments weren't the only reason I found myself wanting out of the house, though. The longer I stayed in that home, the more and more I began to sense an endless air of hopelessness within its walls. My parents had passed away in a car accident. Okay. I had to reread something real quick. Had to reread. Okay. My parents passed away in a car accident. They were on the way home, heading from a meeting up with a family friend when a drunk driver blindsided and T-boned my father's car. I never did see the bodies, but that wasn't because I chose not to. The authorities and coroners were only able to identify my parents by the ID cards in their wallets. The funeral was closed casket. The nightmares were another cause for my wanting to sell the house. Every night leading up to my graduation, I'd have vivid nightmares, scenarios of what my brain thought my parents had gone through in their final moments. I never did see when the crash would occur, though every time that car would make contact with them, I'd jolt awake in a cold sweat. I didn't know if my parents ever found closure, wherever they'd gone after the accident, but I did know one thing. In the time between their deaths and my living in the new house, I never did find closure. The spirit that was the death of my parents haunted me greatly. But it wasn't the only thing to do that. By September of 2010, I made the decision to finally start truly living on my own. I graduated from my university with a bachelor's degree in English. I decided to finally become a writer like my grandfather before me. The only problem was that writing didn't exactly make it for a great career. If it didn't immediately take off, I did not immediately take off. I'd upload some of my writings, mostly horror, to several sites and writing blogs. WordPress was my best friend during that time, allowing me to post many different writings all under the same blog. Of course, none of them took off in the ways I'd hoped they would, but I was prepared for that. I'd managed to get a job at a bank near my university. Luckily for me, they allowed me to come in part time as I was a student. During breaks and other periods of free time, I worked full time. When I graduated and got my degree, I'd managed to keep the job at the bank and kept working and saving for the next 2 months. The money I made working, plus the remaining funds from my inheritance, gave me a once again sizable chunk to spend. With my parents' house sold and my room and board no longer being my room and board, I figured it was finally time to look for a place to settle down. To my complete surprise, I found a large home in the same town where I'd be working. It was no colonial, I'll say that much. But for a single person, it was larger than anything I could have imagined, and it was cheap too. As for why I never asked about the price, I'll tell you. I was a recently graduated depressed orphan who couldn't get his writing to take off from anything worth the dang. I wasn't thinking clearly, so to speak. The house was cheap, it was big, and I hadn't a thought in my head besides the two of those things when I bought it in October of 2010. I never got to receive an official tour of the house, but that was one of the thoughts closer to the back of my mind. As I explored my new home, one thing the realtor did tell me about was the basement. There's a piano down there, he said. Oh, she said. When I pried for more information, she actually told me more instead of being reserved like I thought she'd be. That's where the previous owners died, she told me. That's why the house is so cheap, because the previous owners never got to sell it. But you know, someone's dying is in there doesn't exactly help with jacking up the price. Damaged goods, I remember telling her. That's a good way to put it, she replied. She never told me how the previous owners passed, or the circumstances surrounding it. Luckily, or unluckily for me, I'd find out anyways, but not from the realtor. Just a few days after I bought the house, she disappeared completely. Didn't go missing, I just never saw her again after that. Could never contact her. I suppose I could have expended some more time and effort in finding her, but looking back, it didn't matter then, and it doesn't matter now. Just before she vanished, the realtor also told me about how spacious the basement was. She described making it into a study where I could write. Made sense, considering I told her I was an up and coming writer and all. I told her I would just turn one of the upstairs rooms into a study. I never was the biggest fan of basements, and the fact that someone had died in this one didn't quite sit right with me. I wouldn't be able to focus. No, I knew that much. I didn't know just yet what I'd do to implement a room such as a study in the house, but that was something I'd soon figure out. Those first few days were ones spent getting acclimated to the new environment. The entrance door led to a large open area. In the middle of the room, a large staircase. To the left, the dining room. To the right, the kitchen. Located right next to the staircase leading upstairs, to the right was the living room. And directly next to the staircase leading upstairs to the left was the door that led to the basement. I would go out of my way to avoid that door for the first few weeks. I lived there. Upstairs were several set of rooms. Bedrooms, bathrooms, empty rooms that hadn't yet found use. As I crept through the hallways, I began to realize that this house was not one built with just a single person in mind. It felt odd having such a large space all to myself, but I'd bought it, so that thought was quickly swept to the back of my mind. I searched around until I found a bedroom that I liked. Counting, there were 6 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and 3 rooms that weren't being used for anything in particular on the second floor. Neighboring the bedroom I chose was one of the said empty rooms. I decided then and there that I would make it into my study. In addition to exploration, the first few days were spent moving all my stuff in. The entire process ended up taking a little longer than the few days I explored for, about a week and a half. It was a Friday night when I finally finished moving everything in. I dedicated the following Saturday to my writing. At least, that's what I would have done had I not heard what came from the basement that night. Without me realizing it, the groceries I'd bought at the beginning of the week ran out, and I found myself without ingredients for a meal. I decided I'd order something and chill out in the front of the TV for the night. I finished my order and hung up the phone. I'd been pacing around the counter in the kitchen. It was an island, so I could safely circle around it without much trouble. I left the kitchen and went to the living room, where my TV and PS3 were. I played some games. This is, I can't remember the name of for the next 30 minutes while I waited for my food to arrive. It came swiftly and quietly, the sound. Something almost imperceptible, a quiet, noticeable, solitary note. It sounded as though someone had gone up to the piano in the basement and pressed a key. Instinctually, I paused my game and put the controller down on my coffee table. I got up and slowly crept towards the entryway of the living room. The sound of the note had passed in the few seconds since I heard it, but the implication of it still rang out loudly in my mind. Could someone have been down there? I would have known if someone had broken into my house and gone into the basement, or maybe I wouldn't have. Someone could have made their way in while I was playing the game in the living room. As I thought more about the potential of someone who wasn't me being in the home, more too did my heart rate quicken. It beat rapidly in my chest like a drum designed to let me know when I was afraid. In that moment, I was afraid. I did my best to steel my nerves, and I left the living room. I almost wished that whatever made the sound continued to do so. In that case, at the very least, I'd know it was down there and not up here with me. But no such noise came, and I was left staring at the basement door in terrified, silent anticipation. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my mind still debating on just what could be down there. In addition to the deluge of thoughts about what could have pressed the piano key, another began to form. What if it wants to hurt me? I removed my hand from the doorknob, my heart rate decreasing ever so slightly. Why had I even considered going down into that room without means to defend myself? On the one hand, I mentally kicked myself for even thinking of it. On the other hand, what if I was overthinking it? Maybe it was the piano settling. It could have been rats or some other rodent down there messing around with things. I had to be overthinking things. I had to be. I was about to turn into the kitchen to go get a knife when I heard the doorbell ring, completely forgetting that I'd ordered food a half hour earlier. The sharp, loud sound of the doorbell scared the heck out of me. In the same instant, a wave of relief washed over me like the tides on a beach. There was someone else here now. At least now, there was someone else besides me who might have been in the basement. I swiftly exited the kitchen and opened up the door. I wanted to speak about what happened, but that wasn't the kind of burden I wanted to put on the shoulders of a delivery boy. I gave him the money for the food, got my meal, and we wished each other a good night. I turned around and looked at the doorway leading to the living room and the door to the dining room. If anything similar to what had just happened to me occurred, I wasn't so sure how it would have go a second time. I didn't want to eat in silence. If there were other loud noises, I wouldn't be able to hear the piano. I sat down and put a movie on. I turned the volume up to a level that probably wasn't good for my ears. But if it meant I didn't have to risk hearing the piano again, I'd take it. I made the decision to turn the movie off, go to bed right after eating. I completely ruled out the fact that I was exhausted and possibly hearing things. Perhaps there was no piano playing an entity in the basement. Perhaps I was just tired, and my sleep deprived brain was making things up. That had to be it. I would get a good night's sleep, and things would be fine the next day. I brushed my teeth, put my headphones in, and did my best to go to sleep. As it would unexpectedly turn out, I managed to get to sleep, and relatively quick at that. The problem was that I didn't stay asleep. I remember it vividly, even to this day. I awoke with a start. For a second, I wasn't even aware of the location in which I sat. I looked around and came to familiarity with my surroundings. I was in my bedroom, in my house, and something had just woken me up for some reason. I questioned the cause for my wakefulness. I didn't need to go to the bathroom. There wasn't an unexpected guest in my room, and my music hadn't gotten so loud as to rouse me. In fact, it became apparent to me that I'd forgotten to plug my phone up, and it was dead. I fumbled around in the darkness and plugged it in. I tried to speak, but found out my mouth was too dry to do so. Maybe that was what woke me up, an unyielding thirst. I got up and exited my bedroom. The bathroom I wanted to use was about a 30-second walk from my room. I hoped that I would be quick enough that nothing would happen in the 30 seconds between exiting my room and the entering of the bathroom. I'd hoped in vain. I made it to the bathroom, but I never made it inside the bathroom. I reached to open the door, my hand hovering over the knob, when an all too familiar noise came from downstairs, from the basement. This time, it was even more difficult to make out, yet somehow I managed to still hear it. A single, sharp piano note, then following it, a cacophony. I stopped dead in my tracks and listened closely. I found that my heart had begun to race again, and quickly once more did it thump into my chest like a drum. I breathed heavily. I went to grab the knob of the bathroom door, this time to get in, not to get in, but out of necessity. My legs felt weak, and I wasn't sure if they alone would keep me standing. My hand shook fiercely as I attempted to grip the knob. A cacophony wasn't the right word to describe what I was hearing. It was a proper piece. I know that much now. Years later, after a painstakingly long process of searching, I did end up finding out just what was being played on the piano. Whatever or whoever was down there was playing Suicide in an Airplane by Leo Ornstein. I believe now that What caused me to feel such a monumental sense of fear in that moment was the combination of not knowing if I was alone in a big house in the dark and the disconcerting nature of the piece. The irregular beats of the piano, coupled with the dissonance the song gave, made for a headache of an experience. A fear stricken, mind numbingly horrifying experience. I found rather quickly, in the moment, that my thirst wasn't so much of an issue anymore. I'd also found the strength in my legs and had returned, if only long enough to carry me back into my room. I slammed the door behind me and locked it. That was one of the things I was happy about regarding the house. The doors had locks. I got back in bed, put my headphones in, and tried to drown out the sounds of the piano from 2 floors down. Thought your phone was dead. Sorry. I wasn't sure exactly what point I'd managed to fall back asleep at. All I know is that when I woke up, the sun was peering through my curtains and my headphones were out. I could slightly hear the music that was playing from them. What I couldn't hear, however, was the sound of the piano. Thank God, I thought. I got up and went out into the hallway. Nothing. I went downstairs and into the kitchen. My first thought in was of how thirsty I felt. After fully filling up a cup of water, I drank it quickly and set it in the sink. I was about to open up the refrigerator and get something to eat when I remembered my lack of groceries. Shower and then shop it is, I thought. I went upstairs, gathered some clothes, and I took a shower. For the rest of the time I was in the house during the morning, I didn't hear any noises. Not noises that weren't the house settling anyways. I realized as I was going to leave that I didn't have proper grocery bags. Another item on the list. I cleaned the glass I used and made my way back out of the kitchen. For as long as I kept up the routine, I tried to ignore the basement door. It was like the eye of a deity, even if I couldn't see it. I was well aware of his presence and it couldn't be avoided forever. I steeled my nerves once more and looked at it. It was just a simple wooden door with a brass knob and a lock. Nothing to be afraid of, I thought. Nothing at all. I walked up to the door and found my hand hovering over the knob. It was the strangest thing. It almost felt like I was being drawn to it. I moved my hand up quickly and locked the basement door. If whatever was potentially in there wanted out, it would have to exert some effort. But that wouldn't happen because there couldn't have been anything in that basement. How naive I was. I opened up the front door and walked out to my car. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining and the wind, while present, wasn't obnoxious, as one of my friends would later describe worse weather. Being that it was autumn, too, it wasn't terribly cold, and it wasn't terribly warm either. A balance was struck with the temperature, and all I found myself needing for outside gear was a light coat, that which I had. As I left my driveway and began to make my way to the store, I began to think about the events of the previous night again. I told myself that what happened could have been real, or couldn't have been real. I was dead tired and I was hearing things. I say all of this because that's what I thought. I thought that it just had to be me because there was no way it could have been playing or could have been anything else. Not in my mind. I thought the house couldn't possibly be haunted. I thought there couldn't be anyone but me living in there. I thought it was just me. I had to have been just me. I pushed those thoughts to the back of my mind and continued driving. Before I had time to think about anything else, I'd already pulled into the parking lot of the store. I wanted to make my trip to the grocery store quick, so I didn't meander. I went to the aisles and areas where the items I needed were. 20 minutes later, and I was out of the store. I quickly made my way back home and put the groceries away. After I finished putting the groceries away, I went to check the basement door. Still locked. I breathed a sigh of relief. That surprised me, considering I'd come to the conclusion that there shouldn't have been anything to worry about regarding the downstairs room. As I stood in front of the basement door, I checked my phone. It was still mid-morning. so I decided to do something for myself. I knew I wasn't going to get any writing done, so I opted to go to the library instead. If I couldn't write to entertain myself, then I just consumed what someone else took the time to make. I left the house once more, and within a few minutes, found myself on the road going into town yet again. I hadn't yet decided what I would read when I arrived, but as I pulled into the lot of the library, it came to me. Read a history book. Learning about the history of the town I lived in was something I'd been planning on doing for a while, but I never could find the time. That Saturday, I had the time, and I was going to use it. I found that I was running into some problems rather quickly. What I was hoping to find was a catch all history book, something that included events of all kinds from the beginning of the town until the moment the book was published, and I read it. Once more, my problem was that there was no such book. I was busy scanning and flipping through the books in the history section when one of the library workers came up to me. Are you having trouble finding a certain book? She asked. I turned to her. I am, actually. General history? Sorry, no, she said. But we're getting those types of books in pretty soon. Within the month, actually. I was stuck for something to say. If I couldn't acquire knowledge about the town as a whole, then maybe I could find some info on a smaller scale? Almost as if my previous thoughts had opened the door and invited it, the next thought barged into my head. The house. The basement. Ask about the houses. What do you have on the houses in this town? I asked, looking at her. Her face shifted to one of worry, to one of curiosity, to one of realization. We have one book, actually, she said, getting up. It isn't here on this floor, though. Want me to get it for you? I'd appreciate that, thank you, I replied. She left and went to stand by the table at which I planned to sit at and read. She left and I went to stand by the table which I planned to sit and read. As I stood, several thoughts flooded in my head. I wondered if I'd find out anything regarding the sounds I heard. I began to wonder if it was really my imagination. I didn't know what results reading the book would yield, but as the librarian brought and handed it over to me with a simple "Enjoy," I knew I'd get some form of answers. I sat down at the table and began to flip through the book. I first checked the date of the book. To my surprise, it had been published only a year prior to when I read it. I skimmed the pages that had writings on when the first houses were built in the town, writings of the materials and types of houses built, and examples of notable events and occurrences occurred within some of the houses. An ache struck my chest as I flipped to a page about two-thirds of the way through the book. I flipped to the next page and found a picture of the current house I was living in, albeit a lot older, technically younger looking. I looked near the bottom of the page and found that the house had been built years before I moved into it, about six to be exact. Another thing I noted was the fates of the occupants who in the house. Oh my goodness, I can't read. According to witness testimonies and the police reports, as well as information disclosed by the constantly changing realtors, every single time the house was occupied, it was by a single person. The first owner of the house was not mentally stable. As I came to find out, the first owner of the house was reported to have hanged themselves in an upstairs bedroom. The house no longer had an owner and was therefore put up for sale. This happened in late 2004. The next owner of the house took their own life as well, but they didn't do it because of mental instability. Not mental instability that wasn't already pre-established anyways. They didn't do it because they were depressed. They did it because, according to the neighbors and close friends, in the final few days before they ended their life, they reported seeing scattered visions of a hanging man in one of the upstairs bedrooms. I wasn't sure why they chose the method they chose. Of all the ways, this individual chose to drown themselves in one of the upstairs bathrooms. The house once again went on sale, no one the wiser to what was happening within the walls. This occurred in mid 2005. The next owner of the house reportedly displayed similar behaviors to the previous one: madness, paranoia, anxiety, and a never ending stream of fear. They shot themselves in the kitchen. According to one of their friends, the only thing they were saying leading up to the death was something about someone drowning in the bathroom. But when they attempted to show it to someone else, it was like the drowned individual had never been there in the first place. This particular owner passed in the early 2006. The next owner, as I suspected, complained about seeing visions in their kitchen of a woman shooting herself. The sight itself wasn't what drove the next owner to poison their own food and eat it. No, what drove them to end their own life in such a gruesome manner was the constant ear-ringing gunshots they heard, just hours before they took their own life. They'd had a friend over. The friend left because the owner was frantically asking, "You can't hear that?" The friend only wanted to get help for the owner, but it was too late. By the time the friend returned, with others and some help, the owner had taken his own life via poison. This happened in 2007. The last and most recent owner came up next. I was technically the most recent owner of the house, but this listed all owners who'd taken their own life. The previous owner before me, who bought the house in 2008, was a master piano player, complained about hearing and seeing things in his dining room. What surprised me the most about this particular owner was the amount of time they stayed in the house, for every other owner stayed in the house for at most a year. This owner only lived in the house for 3 months. As was customary with every other owner, she, around 2 months into living in the house, began to complain about the sounds and sights in the dining room. According to friends and family, this woman would play the piano in an attempt to cope with her problems. Reading the next passage, I was saddened to find that her problems were too much for her. Too much as they were the problems for everyone else. She was found by her mother in the early hours of the morning, hunched over the piano, two deep gashes in her wrists. Next to her, streaked with blood, was a note. The full contents weren't laid out on the page, but the last part was, it scared me. I can't handle it anymore. The man in the dining room, he's poisoning himself. He's killing himself, and I can't handle it. I can't handle the sounds. I can't handle the visions. Therapy won't help. Nothing helps. I think I'm going to do it today. I think I'm going to get myself some proper help. I just wish I could come to terms with what's happening to me. I put the book down and closed it. I felt hot. I began to sweat a little, but I knew that was due to my increasing heart rate as well as the increasing pressure of the stress on my mind. Everyone who had owned the house before me ended their lives. Ended their lives after seeing and hearing visions of those who came before them. I felt dizzy and I got up from the table. I began to walk slowly towards the exit of the library. I needed some air. It looked like it was getting dark outside. What the heck? The thought quickly vanished from my mind. I needed to see what time it was. I went to get my phone out of my pocket and I mentally kicked myself. My phone wasn't in my pocket. I started moving faster. I had to check and see if it was in my car. As I unlocked the vehicle and slid into the driver's seat, I looked around. I mentally kicked myself again and slammed the door before punching the steering wheel multiple times. I'd left my cell phone at home. I was going to have to go back and get it. I didn't want to go anywhere near that house at this point. If the pattern were going to continue repeating itself, I'd end up going mad and I would take my own life. I didn't want that. I didn't want to die. I drove a little faster than I should have, but through some force of sheer luck, I didn't get pulled over once, though maybe I should have. I pulled into the driveway and found the house to be dark. This didn't scare me too badly, as I hadn't turned any of them on before I left. What did scare me was when I walked into and found the basement door to be unlocked and opened. What the heck had happened in here for it to be open? Was it a ghost? Could a ghost physically interact with something? At that point, I had many questions, but all I wanted to do was get my phone and get out of there. I sprinted upstairs to my room and found my phone. I grabbed it, but had to question the manner in which I found it. My phone was set in the middle of my bed, screen down, my headphones wrapped up nicely, right next to them. Praying it was just enough mind to think about it later. I grabbed both and turned around to leave my room when I heard it. This time the sound rang out uninhibited and unabated. Once more, the haunting, dissonant sound of Leo Ornstein's suicide in the airplane rang out from the basement. I froze in place and remained that way for a few seconds. The disjointed, arrhythmic melody was beautifully terrifying. It took me a good few seconds to realize the effect it was having on me. I broke out of my little trance and bounded for the stairs. Reaching the base of the steps, I turned to face the basement door. Still to this day, I regret doing what I did next. I had not a single reason to go investigate that door. I didn't have a reason to be any more curious than I'd been hours, days before. I had no reason to do what I did next. Yet, in the following seconds, I found myself making quick strides toward the basement door. I found myself on the third step of the staircase when I stopped. I stared down the mouth of darkness. Leo Ornstein's haunting piano piece rang out from the unknown piano player. Except, I knew who it was. I knew that down in the basement, the previous owner of the house awaited me with open, bloody arms in the short time I was living in that house. I hadn't even thought of going into the basement. It just never occurred to me. I never considered going in prior to that night. But just then, some strange thing was drawing me to it. Still, I fought the urge. I hadn't gone down before, and I wouldn't be going down now. Steeling myself, I turned around and began to make my way back up the stairs. Just before my foot left the first step, the door slammed. It could have been the wind. It could have been any force of nature. It could have just been the way the door worked. But I knew what really happened. It wasn't the wind that closed the door. The door itself slammed with so much ferocity and force that it blindsided me. I expected to take it and be fine. I just have to open the door and then I'd be free. But that's not what happened. No, the door hit me in the face with such a level of force that I couldn't do anything but stand there, take it, and fall. And fall I did, all the way down the stairs. I hadn't received any life-threatening injuries on my fall, but I knew that, should I make it out of the basement, I'd have some bruises on my body the next day. Bruises, however, were near the bottom of the list of things I needed to worry about in that moment. Clearly now, I could hear the haunting melody being played from the piano. This time it almost ached. It felt as though excruciating levels of pressure were being applied to the inside of my ears. My eardrums felt like they were going to burst. I groaned, searching for ground to prop myself up on. The cold concrete floor of the basement did nothing to soothe my pain, inflicted from the fall. I landed back up with my stomach pressing against the floor. Gathering all the strength I could manage, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone. The kind of phone I had at the time didn't have a flashlight, so I had to use the actual screen as a light source. I was mostly using it to look for something, anything I could use to get out of there. However, out of curiosity and the need to know what was making that noise, I raised the phone up and in the direction of where I imagined the piano noises to be coming from. It was a shot in the dark, as I felt like the sounds were coming from every direction. A maelstrom of discordant, sharp piano notes. I tried to mentally brace myself for what I would see when the light landed on the piano, but no amount of nerve steeling or mental shielding could have prepared me for what I saw. There, sitting on the piano bench, gaping wrist wounds, weeping blood onto the floor, was the pianist that haunted me for the last couple of days. She whipped blood over the pristine white keys of the piano and the surrounding area as she played with a fervor unbecoming of a suffered spirit forever destined to remain in this accursed house. I tried to stifle the scream. I knew it was coming, but it was no use. This wasn't something I could just look at and then not care about for the rest of my day. Until that point in my life, I had not experienced one thing that could equal a fraction of the unbridled primal fear I was feeling in my gut. It felt as though someone had dropped an ice-cold rock in the pit of my stomach. She must have noticed the light on her, because a short time after I had bathed her in it, she stopped playing the piano. Without a warning, without anything that could have indicated that she was to stop, she halted, completely and quietly. Her face was the first thing I saw, as she turned to look at me dead in the eyes. The pit in my stomach grew larger, and I felt something catch in my throat. Whether it was my fight or flight kicking in, I didn't know. What I was aware of, however, was the increasingly quick rate at which my heart began to beat. I felt waves of fear wash over me again and again. Then she got up from the bench. The sounds of bare feet slapping against wet, bloody concrete terrified me. But as she approached closer and closer, something else came to me. The fear remained in my body as strong as it had ever been, and hopefully as strong as it ever would be. But there was something else. A sudden surge of energy, a burst. Something I could use. Something that would help me get out of the basement and out of that house. I used the burst of energy to get up and turn around just before I made it to the stairs. I felt her grab my arm. I was about to whirl around and try to get her off of me when the physical properties of blood did all the work for me. Just as fast as she managed to grip onto my forearm, the slippery blood caused her to lose her grip, and I escaped from her bloody one-handed grasp. As I bounded up the basement stairs, I didn't think of whether she'd be able to get out or not, but that was far from the most important thing on my mind. I reached the top of the stairs and opened the door. To my surprise, it wasn't locked, but it wasn't going to complain. I slammed it behind me with enough force to send small cracks in the door and cause it to splinter slightly. I wasn't taking any time to rest. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed a dish towel, turned the stove on, and lit the dish towel ablaze. I made my way back out to the main area and through the flaming rag. Just then, I heard the basement door crash open, but I was already running through the open front doorway. Now the sounds of the piano weren't anywhere to be found. As I got in and started my car, I found the reason for that. Looking through the open front door, I could just barely make it out, but I knew what I was looking at. Dripping blood on the floor, smile on her face, was the woman playing the piano. As the spreading flames licked at the stairs and the door frame of the basement, she turned around and began to walk back down the stairs. Behind her, the door slammed, and the flames began lapping at it more fiercely. I didn't care about that, though. I cared about getting away from that house as quickly as possible, and as far away as possible. I didn't want a thing to do with that place anymore. As a matter of fact, I decided that night that I didn't want anything to do with that town in general. As I drove, I remembered the blood she'd gotten on me. I went to find something to wipe it off when I actually got a good look at my arm. There was nothing on it, but a slowly forming bruise from my fall. I accepted it and kept my eyes on the road. I'm not sure how long I drove for. Only that I ended up in Davenport, Iowa, nearly 24 hours later. I checked into a shifty motel and watched the news in Vermont a few minutes for a few minutes. They covered the burning down of the house from late in the night until right when I watched it. Strangely enough, they treated it as though it was an accident. It wasn't, but I suppose there wasn't any evidence left to say otherwise. After a good night's sleep, I decided to actually look around town for a bit. I eventually got acclimated to the town of Davenport, Iowa. Got a decent job, coincidentally, at a bank. I managed to save up enough and buy another house. Albeit years after the event, the new house was a lot smaller than the previous one. Or is. I suppose since I still live there when I bought said house. It was under the specific condition that it did not have a basement. Another thing I was worried about was living alone. But as of 3 years ago, 2018 and 2023, I don't have to worry about that anymore. It's just me, my wife, and our daughter in this house now. I work, spend time with my family, and I write when I can. It's a good life, one I never thought I'd have. It certainly wasn't what I was thinking about wasn't what I was thinking about in that basement, but I don't willingly think about the basement of the house anymore. Not willingly. I've never told my wife about the suicide house, or that phantom piano player. I don't think I plan on doing so. Not for a while, at least. Maybe I'll tell her or my daughter when she's older. We're living a good life, and I don't want to tarnish that. It's not all perfect, though. You see, I may have physically escaped the house, but even 16 years later, the memories of what happened in that place still plague me. I still dream about my parents and that car crash they got in, but they're not the only ones. I dream about the man that hanged himself in the upstairs bedroom. I dream about the woman who drowned herself in the upstairs bathroom. I dream of the woman who shot herself in the kitchen. I dream of the man who poisoned himself in the dining room. And I always dream about the woman in the basement who carved into her wrist the wounds of death. I dream of every single one. They don't scare me. Not as much as they did anymore. They may not have to come to terms with their lives and their subsequent ending of those lives. But I have. Call me selfish, call me whatever you want, but that's the truth. Still, do I dream about the occupants of that house? But I don't run in fear. I comfort them, tell them that it wasn't their fault, that I care. The house is gone, but the memories remain. The dreams, I can deal with those. But there's something else that happens to me. It isn't nightly, but it happens just frequently enough that there's consistency in its occurrence. Sometimes I'll wake up real early in the morning. I don't know what causes me to awaken, but every time, without fail, I go downstairs. The house is quiet, and I concentrate hard enough I can just barely hear it. Somewhere below me, I can faintly hear the haunting dissonant chords of Lear Ornstein's Suicide in an Airplane. Um, I think it was a good story. It had great volume to it. It definitely has some layers to it. Uh, I don't know if you used AI to write it or whatnot. Help had some help with it or whatever. I just know when I see those lines, I automatically assume because of that. Also, I had to reread a couple things because I thought you were saying that your parents took their own lives, but then uh, that's why they left you being an heir because they took their own lives, and then you were their only heir because you were the only child, which I feel like didn't need describing because if you were the only child, of course you'd be their only heir. That's just me. That's just my thought on it. Um, but that is why I thought that it possibly could be an AI written story. Very good, haunting, had some good body to it, had a very good ending right up as me with pattern recognition and ADHD and a diploma to prove that I could have I've seen that coming from a mile away. Yes, you are taking care of the spirits. You are now the caretaker of those spirits. The house is no longer there. That is now your garden to tend to. So, very good written story. Um, I like to think that the ghost lady and the piano decided to move your headphones onto your bed so that you had something, you know, to plug your ears in with. And I think that she knew what was happening, so that's why she had you had your earplugs and your phone together at the same time. So, um, also, uh, the first person that was mentally ill, I guess, his his death started everything and kept everybody there, so he kept seeing somebody. But I think that hearing a noise in a big house when you're alone is definitely creepy in its own way, and it always be creepy no matter what. Because the biggest thing for humans is the unknown. So uh, I think that is a well written story, and uh, I had a lot of good little layers to it. But the first part of it kind of confused me a little bit, just because, like I said, uh, you were talking about your parents, and then you were talking about the parents that left you everything because you were the sole heir, because you were the single child, still are, kind of thing. And I don't know, it's kind of read weird to me. Maybe that's just me. That's just my thing. So, um, oh, can't spell either. Amazing. Ah, yeah, it was an amazing story. My YouTube channel. Couple of feedbacks here. For the first one, I thought that it was AI written, so please don't take offense when I say it in the video. LOL. Uh, the doorway. Um, okay. And then there was one other thing. One more thing that I was gonna say. Oh, the storyteller becoming the caretaker of this. I always want to capitalize everything. I don't know why. All right. Okay. Excuse me. Goodness gracious. Okay. Squeaky wheel down here. That's my mouse. That's the reason why I sound like that. Um, yeah, I think a little hour reading is pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off here. If you guys do watch this video, whatnot, I'm gonna try and do uh, an hour every day of reading. Try and find some good creepypastas to read, or we might just do some "Am I the A-holes?" Try and see if you guys want to weigh in on that. Go ahead and get in the comments. Let me know what you think about the page, what you think about the videos. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more. And don't forget to voice your opinions with me. If you don't like the way that I read, the way that my pacing is, Or if you love it, if you love the way my pacing is, just go ahead and drop in the comments. Let me know, and then I'll definitely make sure that I know my biggest problem with reading is enunciation. So, um, but yeah, I think I'm gonna call it a night right now, and then get back after it tomorrow. Let's got another person in YouTube Live. How you doing? Welcome. Apologies, about to get off. Or maybe I can do like half hour. I can do like a half hour of Am I the A-hole? That's what it's about, close to 2 hours. What do you think? Newly recruited person in the chat. What do you think? Type a Y in chat for reading some more, or type an N in chat for me to close everything down. It all hinges on this one person, and if they leave, that'll be it. The stakes have never been higher. Let's go to my notifications. Okay, got nothing here. Oh, the Russian sleep experiment. That's pretty cool. That was a good little story. Okay, they left. All right, I'm ending it. The live. Good night, everybody. Remember, please subscribe, like the video, and just come hang out next time. Talk to you all later. Bye.